Hello and welcome to the Ease of Business podcast. I am Ann Tipton, joined today with my friend Celeste Hartwell, who is the co-podcaster. Is that what we're called?
Co-host, maybe?
Co-host? Sure, that thing. We're here talking to you about The Big Leap today, which is, for me, been a very impactful book on my journey of both being a business owner and then also this whole world of self-help entrepreneurship. Like, this was a hugely impactful book for me today, so I'm really excited to talk about it and share my thoughts and kind of go over what we felt like the important parts were of this one.
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk about this book. I mean, I'm just excited to be doing this podcast, to be honest. Like, Anne and I have been talking about this for many, many months, and I'm just so excited that it's finally come together. And so it seemed very apropos to start with The Big Leap, because this is kind of a big leap for us as well. And I mean, I'm just willing to dive in, Anne, and like start having a conversation about it. I know that when I first read this book, the notion of the upper limit problem was mind blowing for me. And the fact, I mean, I literally was like going around, and everybody who I would see in my life, I would be like, oh, they're not like that. They hit their upper limit. Like, they had to create something shitty so that they like got taken down. And I just started seeing it everywhere, which was kind of ridiculous, but it was just such an eye opener for me. And I really found that it's true for so many of us. Like, if it's almost like we feel like we can. So just to back up and explain a little bit for people who haven't read the book and don't know what I'm talking about, Gay Hendricks' theory is that basically you have an upper limit for how much joy you can allow into your life. And if you hit that upper limit, it's kind of like a ceiling, if you will, then you typically will create some type of event, injury, illness, etc., to really take yourself out of the game and like make you feel bad, instead of just experiencing the joy that you could have. So tell me, how was that with you, Anne? Like, did you have like a huge aha moment like I did? I felt like my head exploded. Like,
Yeah, so not only did I go around and see people in my life that I applied, that it's like, oh yeah, that's what happened there, but I also kind of hit the rewind button on my own life. And I was like, oh, there and
yep.
there and there. Because I do think we all, and I personally, I absolutely love the audiobooks, right? So for me, listening to it is always more helpful. I'm an auditory learner, and they talk about ulping in the book, which is upper limit problem-ing, and have made it a verb. So I love that. So I've found in my life, and I like that is part of my inner monologue now, is like, oh, you're ulping that. Like that is a word that has become a part of my internal vocabulary, which I think is so it's a strange word, but I really it's so helpful to recognize those patterns in yourself and be able to identify and stop that before it starts actually causing you drama or pain, whether it's physical, which I've definitely seen this manifest as physical pain for people, including myself. I've definitely seen this manifest as like stuff that's happening in the outside world, but I've also seen it manifest as like just drama in your own head, right? Like, it can totally be like, well, he didn't take the trash out. Like, even that, like, just the dumbest stuff that you just start this own crap for no reason, but it's because you've hit that upper limit of happiness. So yeah, brilliant for me.
Yeah, and that just brought up this amazing example that I have. So I'm going to totally like throw my partner under the bus a little bit. Um, we were long distance at the time, and getting back together and all of this. And we had spent, I think it was like 5 days in DC or something like that. We had this amazing trip. I was out there interviewing for a job. He came out and worked from there, had some meetings with his clients, and we had this incredible time. It was like really deepening our connection. We were so in it. And at the time, we were actually reading another book by Gay Hendricks called Conscious Loving, A Journey to Co-Commitment. And in that book, he talks about upper limits as well, because this is like part of his work. And as we got home, my beloved then went to play hockey and got like a serious injury. And I was like, what happened there? I'm like the really annoying girlfriend, right? Like, I'm like, what do you think's going on with that? Because I totally knew. And he's like, clearly I hit an upper limit, you know? And I was like, I love it. Like,
That's
I
very
love
gracious of him that he allows you to coach him that way. I definitely have some people in my life that would not be so welcome to be coached like that.
He's very patient. Like, he's very patient. There's sometimes I've kind of leaned off a little bit now, but in that moment, I was just like, ooh, like, super annoying. I'm not that annoying anymore, thankfully. Not in that way. Maybe other ways, but not in that way. But yeah, I mean, I think it's so powerful, and it just, yes, I think the same. And like, I was able to kind of go backwards as well and be like, oh my God, my whole life, like every time like something was going really, really well, I would just, and to be fair, I still do it, right? Like, just knowing it doesn't mean that like you're perfect. It's still a work in progress.
But I think like any of these topics, like with in the self-help arena, it's not so much that you stop doing the thing that was bad. It's just that you identify it early and you don't actually let it ruin anything. Right. I think that's the
Yeah.
goal, not like to actually stop doing the behavior. I think that would be like above what's possible for a human. I think we're all still allowed to be human and just recognize these things.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. So, but I do think awareness really, really helps, because now I see it much more frequently. Like, oh, why am I getting bitchy right now? Like, this is not a big deal. It's very interesting, but it
Yeah, and he
happens.
says in the book that there are two common upper limits. One of them is fear and one of them is sabotage. And so the fear thing is really interesting because sometimes you can just make up stuff that's like that hasn't even happened or might not even happen. What's that Mark Twain quote about? I've known a great many fears and most of them have never really happened. Whatever that quote is. Like I think you can go down that path of like well, oh, well, this went really well. So, well, when this happens and then this happens and this happens, like I know people who I've watched to go through this process. Well, I can't make more money in my business because once I make $10 million, do you know how much taxes I'm gonna have to pay on that? And
Right.
it's like, yeah, but like that's okay. Like, that's
Yeah.
not a reason to stop. But you can
Right.
allow that fear to stop you, or you can say, you know what? I'm going to be rational about this and worry about that as I get there. And I don't have to go from I've made no money in business to I'm making an astronomical sum and then have to worry about taxes. Like there are processes in place to make that not as scary as 0 to 100, you know.
Right. And get help,
Yeah.
like higher help, which actually leads into the 4 zones that we are working from. And, 3 of them we need to just stop, right? So that is like the 4 zones of work, and the zone of genius is what Gay talks about in the book. So basically, the zone of incompetence, which we've all been there. You suck at the task. Many people can do it better than you, so just hire somebody to do it. The zone of competence, you're all right, but lots of other people do it better. Um, and you're not passionate about it, right? Like, that's part of the competence thing. And zone of excellence, you're highly skilled and few can hold a candle to you. But again, you're still not like, woo, right? I think of my 18 years in corporate. Yeah, I was great at it and I hated it, right? So not the whole 18 years, but a lot of it. And then the zone of genius, you're literally the best in the world. And this is what you should be doing. This is the only thing that you should be working on. So I know that you've had like a big ahas around this. So tell us a little bit more about that, and like how this really changed things for you.
For sure. Well, as a I don't know if we talked about this in last episode or not, but it's something I say often. I'm not a type A. I'm a type A plus. Like it's not even just good enough to be a type A. I've got to even be even better than that. And so interestingly enough, part of that for me, and I think this is also instilled by corporate, like that it doesn't matter if something is in your zone of incompetence or your zone of competence, you're going to do it and you're going to do it well. And so
Right.
I think that can be such a challenge, especially when you're young and you don't have, like, first of all, this knowledge to say, hey, this is a zone of incompetence for me. Find anybody else who's better at this, right?
Right.
Because there's so many people who are good at the things that you're not good at. So it's really a terrible use of your time and energy to do those things.
But like that in corporate then teaches you resourcefulness, right?
It can,
It
yes.
can. I mean, it did for me. It was like, so I just would take initiative and then go figure it out and, see if I was doing it right or whatever. And I think that resourcefulness is a really amazing skill, but it's not your zone of genius. And
Absolutely.
that's the thing that only you can do. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I got really excited about
No,
that.
no, you're good. It's one of those things where, like, yeah, you can absolutely take something from a zone of incompetence issue to a zone of excellence issue, and it's still not where you're supposed to hang out. And
Right.
I also think it's worth saying that living in the zone of genius, like to actually curate a life that allows for a zone of genius existence, is a luxury. Like, it's not one of those things that everybody gets, and it's not one of those things that everybody gets right away. Like, it definitely takes some work to build up a life that supports a zone of genius existence, and to put the pressure on yourself to make that happen yesterday is not, it's not valid, right? Like, it's not okay to do that. Again, type A plus personality, I may have been guilty of this in the past, just saying.
I love it. Yeah, well, I mean, it is a luxury, and I think it also is a responsibility if
Mhm.
you're going to be an entrepreneur. Because if you're really looking at this entrepreneurial path as I really want to help a lot of people, I really want to, hone my craft, I really want to show up in a really powerful way and being as visible as possible, then I think that there's a little bit more responsibility to really figure that out, right? Like to really figure out what do I do that only I can do and everything else, how can I hire that out? Right? Like how can I like give that to the virtual assistant, give that to the, marketing person, give that to the editor, like whatever those things are. And I'm not going to lie, I'm still guilty as hell at this.
Mhm.
Like I'm still like got my little fingers and all the things cuz I do feel like there is a space of empowerment for me as a business owner to know how to do all of the things before I give it to somebody else. So I think that's not quite what Gay is teaching in this book. I'm going to be really honest, but I don't know if I'm type A plus. I don't feel like I'm quite there anymore. I think I was. But as somebody who maybe likes a little bit more control than a lot of other people. Like, I don't know, still recovering, control freak on some levels, and perfectionist for sure. Uh, there's still, room to grow there for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's totally valid to do some things that are in your zone of excellence. Sometimes it's just easier to do them yourself and move on. And yeah, it's just not 100% prescription. But I do think you're right in terms of accountability and like at being, I don't know, just like a duty, right?
Right.
To figure out, if not to live there all the time, then at least to put yourself in a place where that is the majority of what you do, or the foundation of what you do. And then find people, start with finding people who can do the zone of incompetence things, and then work your way up that scale until, maybe someday you get to live in a world where you get to do all your zone of genius things, and that is all. I personally don't live there, but kudos to anybody who can figure that out and live there full time, because I think sometimes, especially if you're a business owner who is managing people, sometimes even the managing people stuff is like, personally, I don't know that managing people is my zone of genius, right? But it's something that I
Right.
have to do to make sure that the zone of incompetence and the zone of competence stuff gets done. So, you know, in a perfect world, sure, but in real life,
Well,
stuff
I
happens.
think it is fair to say like it's like anything in life. Take baby steps, right? Like I've had a house cleaner for the last 7 or 8 years because I don't desire to clean the toilets or the floors after there were 3 teenage boys in this house at one point, right?
Right.
So I'm gonna be real there. Like I was like, yeah, no, no, thanks. But and we've kept him and we have an amazing house cleaner. And those are the types of things, right? But and then there are people who are like, oh, and I would love to send my laundry out and all that stuff. Do the like hire out the things that you can afford that are reasonable and that will free you up from like I hate that. Like laundry doesn't bother me. It's not a big deal. You put it in and then you put it in another machine. I'm not scrubbing washboards, right? So we've come a long way on that. But I know some people who absolutely loathe laundry, then hire that out, right? So do that. I mean, there's those little things that I think can free up a lot of not only like physical energy from not spending the time on it, but also mental anguish of like worrying about it and overthinking it and like dreading it, right?
Yeah, well, and I mean, just in terms of having a housekeeper, I think one of the things that comes with that delegation, one of the secret gifts that nobody tells you about that delegation is that it does take out that mental anguish. So
Right.
even if hour for hour, dollar for dollar, you could do it exactly the same as the person who you're hiring to do it. If you're giving up 4 hours of procrastination that you would have spent saying, oh, I don't want to do that, but I should go do it, then that alone is the secret sauce with hiring somebody, especially when it's something you really don't want to do. At least that's what I've found.
No, agreed. I totally agree. And as soon as I said mental anguish, I was like, man, I can think of a lot of other things that I should be hiring out because they give me mental anguish.
And again, that list can be somewhat aspirational. We don't have to do it all today.
Right. And it's baby steps and it's, some part of the process is identifying those things, right? Like just figuring out what that was. And so I just wanted to quickly go into this book. I thought this was so interesting. Um, I have my little tabbies on like the pages that, I
And you're
have.
not a type A plus?
I try not to identify as that.
Fair enough.
Maybe I'm recovering type A plus. Um, you should see some of my other books. They're like every page is flagged. It's crazy. Um, but this I really liked this. In along the lines of the zone of genius in the same chapter, there's like your genius commitment. And I think that that's a big portion that so many of us miss out on the importance of commitment. And so he has like this one phrase, which is why it's tabbed. It says, I commit to living in my zone of genius now and forever. And he says, make it a private deal between you and the universe, a formal commitment to living in your zone of genius, and repeating it to yourself, noticing how it feels, say it aloud a few times, savor the different words and the sounds of the sentence. I love, he and his wife are so into like feeling the things in your body, and like it's really like a whole mind body soul connection, which I don't think that I got that when I read this book, but I've taken some courses with them now for like couples stuff, with their couples work, and now I see it more in this book than I did before. And then the other thing that I really loved about this, one of the other things that I tagged was he had this like ultimate success mantra. And I just remember being really, really moved by that because it says the ultimate success mantra is a comprehensive intention you'll use to center yourself in your zone of genius. It's a set of instructions to your conscious and unconscious mind designed to inform all your actions and decisions. And that phrase is super simple. It is, I expand in abundance, success, and love every day as I inspire those around me to do the same.
That's a good one.
Right? That's why I flagged it. Yeah. I'll say it again. I expand in abundance and success and love every day as I inspire those around me to do the same. I think that's so powerful. It's just like this book is not a very long read. It's not a very long listen, but it's so chock full of little nuggets like that. Um, and I always laugh when people are like, "Oh yeah, I read that once," and then, like with these types of books, I have to devour them multiple times to like really let it sink in and to really be able to digest it and metabolize it and like make it a part of my everyday. And I'll be honest, I've only read this book once, but clearly that needs to change. But yeah, so were there any other like little things that, or do you want to talk up on those two things a little bit?
Well, sure. I mean, so for me, this is a book that I reread about once a year.
Mm,
It's one that I revisit, and I think that is another one of the blessings of audiobooks. Is for me, it feels very accessible to just turn it on, and I am so bold as to occasionally just like guide my finger along the progress bar on my phone and just like pop in the middle somewhere. And I have found that sometimes I find stuff that I'm supposed to hear. Like sometimes
mm,
that finger just ends up in the right spot, and it's like, oh, yep, needed to hear that today. Thank you for that little nugget. Because I know that this is one, like you say, it's very, very short, very simple, very easy read, and it's very story driven. Like it feels very conversational in his tone of writing, which I really appreciate as well. So it's just super easy to get through. Like some of these books are just like they're heavy and there's hard language and you have to use your brain a whole lot to think about the things. This one is not that way at all, right? Like this is simple and straightforward, and I so appreciate that. And so it's super easy to just pop in there and say, what do I need to hear from this today? And especially if I do find myself ulping, I will reach for this one on, like, it is one that is always downloaded on my phone, accessible in my app to reach. Um, I did have a quote that I think is amazing, and it's something that I've been chewing on lately that has kind of come up. It's a quote from the book that says, "If I cling to the notion that something is not possible, I'm arguing in favor of limitation. And if I argue for my limitations, I get to keep them." So this whole concept, and it's amazing because I've been doing a lot of kind of reading, studying, watching things related to personal finance. And I think this is an area where the big leap kind of smacks right in the face, because it's like, you know what, you can choose to have all the things you want and a bunch of money in savings and a giant retirement account and a bunch of investments and all of those things, or you can choose that you can have one or the other. And I think that there are so many people preaching online these days, from all walks of life, from all areas, that like you get to pick one. You can have nice things or you can have money in the bank. And I think exactly what Gay is saying here is that if you want to argue for that limitation that you can have one or the other, go for it and you'll be right. But I would rather make the choice that I am not going to argue for that limitation. I'm going to argue that what I want is possible. And so I'm going to get both. And I think that that's just like, like it's just one of those things that like that lesson has just been hitting me from different angles for a while now on that particular topic. And I just love, I love when people can summarize what she has done in this quote so quickly and so poignantly, like, boom, there it is. And I feel like this is one of those.
I love that. And I even want to take that back to the whole conversation around the zone of genius.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you think that you can't live in your zone of genius right now, you are right.
Yep.
I used to have, it's a Henry Ford quote, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Mm-hmm.
I've had that on my desk for years and years. Oh yeah, here it is. I literally have it on a sticky note.
Nice.
Like, and it's been there for 20 years, like no lie. Same sticky. And because that's so powerful, right? Like if you think you can't just live in your zone of genius, you're right. You're going to be right. You're going to prove yourself right. And you can also say, I'm committing to doing that and I'm stepping into that and I'm willing to learn how to do that. Right. And to like kind of move into that in a different way, because all of these things are upper limits. I feel like I've been talking about upper limits all day personally. But it's like, we get told so often that success is it's lonely at the top. It's lonely at the top, right?
Mhm.
And that does not have to be true. But if we think that it's true, we're going to make it true for us. And that's an upper limit because it doesn't have to be. You can have an amazing, healthy relationship. You can have incredible friends and community around you. You can have like the life that you desire. The biggest work, and maybe he talks about, I don't think that he talks about that too much, but it's basically figuring out, what do you want?
Mhm.
What do you want? And then deciding, oh, I'm gonna have that, right? Like that commitment. And that's why I really liked that ultimate success mantra, because I think that just fits so perfectly into that. um Having everything that you desire, but and also like reading this book that has amazing tips and tricks for how to move past your upper limit issues, the fear and the self-sabotage and all of that. I mean, it's just chock full of so much amazing information.
I agree. And I think one of the problems with entrepreneurship today is that part of the ethos of small business ownership is that, oh, to get to the top, where it's going to be lonely, by the way, aside, you have to hustle and grind and 16-hour days and no sleep. And, if you're a woman, oh, by the way, and raise the children and cook the food and clean the house and do all the things, right? Like you're supposed to do it all. And I was watching a YouTube video last night that featured Sunny Leonard Dozie. I think that's how you say her last name. It's a long one. And she was reinforcing this belief of hustle, hustle, hard, hard, hard.
Mm.
And how she believed that that's how you got to the top. And she had all these clips of famous people, it was the Gary Vanderbeeks and all of the people, saying, oh, well, I crashed and burned. I hit rock bottom. All of these things, like these horrible things. And it was about her story of she ended up working herself so hard and so long and so fast that she ended up in the hospital at, I think, 25 or 28, like way too young. With They thought she was having a stroke.
Wow.
And I mean, she was like literally in like physical peril of death because she worked herself so hard. And I think that it's really, really scary and difficult to be in a world where this is idolized. This is, something we're supposed to want to be like. This is supposed to be aspirational. That I end up in a hospital because I worked myself to death? Literally, come on, people. Like, that's not what this is about at all. And so I think we have to be very careful and very mindful. And honestly, I mean, that's part of the reason that we started this podcast, right? Is because I think it's so rare to find those examples of people who are out there doing the thing in a balanced and holistic, and I know balance is kind of a loaded word, but in a more sustainable
Yes.
way. And I think finding your zone of genius and hanging out there the majority of the time is definitively part of not wrecking yourself, right?
Right.
So I think it's 2 points here. One, to be mindful of who you're taking information, because other people can ulp you, right? They can say, oh, well, if you do that. And that's why it's so important to choose your friends very wisely, people that will support you and not say, well, if you make $10 million, you're going to have to pay taxes on that. Like you can
Right.
find people like that who are going to, whereas, a friend like you would say, hey, I've got this great accountant. I want you to talk to her. She's going to, she'll take those fears away. Like there are solutions to your
Right.
problems. So surround yourself with people who don't ulp for you. And also be mindful of the content that you take in and the people that you're listening to, even if they're not close personal friends, but also the gurus of the world who are supposedly making it. And be very mindful of who you're taking advice from there too, because you can definitely land yourself in a position where you're getting advice and taking on advice that is not meant for you.
I love all that. Thank you so much for sharing that, because I'm just like a huge hell yes. Like this is, and this brings up for me the idea too of when we have really amazing goals and missions, and we have a vision for what we desire in our life, in our business, whatever that is, we have to, in the beginning, be very mindful about who we share that with. Because just as Anne was talking about, like if they have their own upper limit issues and they're not working on them, and they kind of vomit their upper limits on you, when you're so new to your endeavor, to your venture, whatever that looks like, and maybe you've been doing it for a while but you haven't really been moving anywhere in it, and you're really trying, it's probably because you're talking about it to the wrong people. And the self-sabotage, that's probably where you are in that cycle, right? Like, so I've kind of, and I feel like he talks about this in there, like I've gotten much more mindful about like, okay, why am I going to bring up this topic of my business with this particular person who doesn't own a business? Right? Like, what is my intention with sharing this issue that I'm having, or this whatever, right? And it's about having a little bit more self-awareness and internal dialogue about what's going on with me right now. And maybe finding the one safe place. This is why I love coaching. This is why there's a lot of coaches, like finding that person who can actually really hold that vision for you, who can really like just be that sounding board as well. I mean, I know for myself, I I I speak and things will come out, and then I need somebody to kind of hold a neutral space to just hear me, to see like what's going on in here, because I don't even always know what's going on until I speak it out. Um but like being a little, and it's not judgmental, but it's discerning,
Right.
right? Like being discerning about who we're talking about. It doesn't mean that you don't love your mom, but if your mom has never been an entrepreneur and she doesn't understand why you're spending money on this program and this coach and this blah, 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 right? Like, why bother her with that information? Like, she's not going to validate that choice. So find your crazy entrepreneur friends or community who are like, oh yeah, yeah, I've spent way more than that on a coach. Like, let me tell you about it. And I learned a lot from that experience.
And
And
it
I
was
would
worth every penny and then some. Yes.
Right, right. It was worth every penny and then some. It got me to exactly where I needed to go, or I learned these specific lessons. This is why it really helped me in these ways. And now I can make a more better informed decision. I learned, you know what I mean? Like there's so many different things. And like having that community is really, really important to us. Because so that is why we actually created the Ease of Business Facebook group. So the Ease of Business podcast has a private Facebook group. And if you're interested in more content like this, in knowing when we're going to go live, but it's pretty easy. It's the second Tuesday of each month at 7 p.m. Eastern. We really want to invite you to join us. We are primarily on Facebook, but also on YouTube at the Ease of Business podcast there as well as all the places where podcasts are audibly. So we just, I that just kind of led in very naturally. I really feel very confident and very passionate about holding space for people who have big dreams and don't have a good place to talk about them.
Yeah. Well, and
Because
I think it's important to articulate as well that, it's a lot of those people who are saying those things, they're doing it because they care about you and they don't get it. Right. Like it's not necessarily malice. It's not like you need to stop talking to these people necessarily. It's not like they're bad friends or bad family or they're not supporting you. It's just being mindful of who you're having those conversations with, because you're right. Mom might feel that super strong instinct to protect you, and that might not involve making the investment or going to the place or doing the thing or whatever that looks like. Or it could be a friend or, hopefully not a spouse or a partner, but, sometimes that too. So,
it happens.
mhm.
Yeah, I've had that happen. So
Somebody else has. Yeah.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that he loves me any less, right? Like it's out of that safety and protection, right? Like how can I protect this person? So I'm going to be, I'm going to share my thoughts and opinions, which weren't necessarily helpful for me in the beginning. Um and so that's why, yeah, I think like Anne said, it's not taking yourself out of those relationships. It's just being more mindful about what am I talking to them about, right? Like if they're asking about the business and you don't feel good about the business, just be like, oh, it's going great, and just change the subject, right? So how's my sister? How's this? How's that going? Right? Like just change the subject. Most people will just go along with that. Um, and and then find your community. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a priceless thing to have, is a good community, and whether it's us or someone else, right? Like it
Right.
doesn't have to be us, but we'd love to have you if you're resonating with what we're saying here. So anything else on the book before we move to next month's?
I'm good with this book. I feel complete. I'm very excited. So yeah, I was gonna ask you the same. I'm good.
All right, you want to tell them what we're doing next month?
I don't have it. Oh, so we're doing the lane. Okay, so next month, same time, same place, Facebook Live. Then we'll upload to YouTube and the podcast platforms. But if you want to catch us live, you're totally welcome to follow us on the Ease of Business podcast business page on Facebook. And we are going to be reading The Lazy Genius by Kendra Adachi,
Yep.
I believe.
Mhm.
And this book is so incredible. Like Anne was telling me about it, and I was like, oh yeah, maybe. And I will say, I'm just going to give a little precursor so that anybody who maybe reads it and gets frustrated. Kendra is a mom, and it really talks a lot about ways to lazy genius your home and your processes with kids. But just keep in mind that all of these skills are transferable, that you can do all of these things in your business too. So it is very, very powerful. It's a really quick read, quick listen, etc. We'll put the links down in the comments, or yeah, down in the descriptions, on YouTube and on Facebook, on all the podcast places. You'll figure it out. Or you can visit us on Facebook and get all the links. And it's such a powerful read, and it literally has changed my life, period. Like that's all I have to say. So, Anne, do
So
you have
I
anything?
think it's going to be kind of lame, because all the books that we're going to share probably on this podcast have influenced our life heavily in some sort of way. So to say, like, I think it's going to sound redundant that like every book that we're going to go through has changed our lives.
It's true.
That's why we're talking about it. If it didn't change my life, I'm probably not going to bring it up on this podcast. That's just part of the jam. So yes, highly influential book. I think as you read it, you might you could be a little confused about why we chose this, because it is not related to business technically at all. Like, I don't think she talks about business at all in the book. However, the main theme of the book is that you want to set your life up so that you can be lazy about the things that you do not care about and a genius about the things that you do. And to me, that is just like so brilliant. So again, it kind of feeds into this concept of this zone of genius sort of situation. Like she gives permission to allow you to go ahead and say, you know what? I just don't care. Like, this podcast currently does not have an Instagram account. I use Instagram. My other things have Instagram. This podcast doesn't. And you know what? That's just fine. She gives you permission to so there are certainly like businessy lessons intertwined in like the household and life stuff that I think are absolutely valid. And I also think that more than likely, if you are a woman who is running a business, you are running up against some of the household stuff as well.
Right.
As much as we wish that there were total equity in maintaining a home, I don't know any woman who doesn't have a very serious foot in the maintenance of her household, period. So usually a lot more than 50% of the women I know. So I think it's an incredible read. I hope you get a chance to take a look through. We'll deep dive into the book next month. I think it's brilliant. Also, she does have an Instagram account, and I would highly recommend, if you're on Instagram, go follow her. I believe it's Lazy Genius Way. I'd have to check, but um, Kendra Adachi is her name. She is hilarious. Like, her stories are so funny. So, and also very insightful and helpful. So highly recommend that you go give her a follow. Check out the book. It's brilliant. And we'll be here to talk all about it next month.
Awesome. Well, we really appreciate you guys tuning in, listening, watching, wherever you're finding this content. Please give us a like, share, follow. Join our Facebook community at the Ease of Business Podcast Facebook group. And we will see you next month. Thank you so much.